On the phone, our panel, Christy Harvey, Director of Strategic Communications at the Center for American Progress, Petraeus, or Duncan Black, as we like to call him, from the blog Eschaton, and Victoria Jones, Managing Editor and White House Correspondent for Talk Radio News Service at talkradionews.com. Victoria, let's start with you. General David Petraeus has come out with this pronouncement after having said, I guess, several weeks ago that the surge has only been going on for 2 months. Now he's saying this number 23. Chad.
Is there anything you see so far that would indicate you would recommend a withdrawal from Iraq?
We haven't even started the surge, the full surge yet, so let me have a few months. I'll answer that in September.
Thank you very much.
So the full surge has not started yet. He wants to answer it in September, but we saw reports from ABC News last week, I guess a week and a half ago, that he was pretty convinced that in September he's going to have some progress to report, it's looking like. How many different stories does this guy have?
It's unbelievable. I mean, each one, of course, don't forget, is a pronouncement from Mount Olympus and carries the same weight. So everything he says is utterly, completely true. Well, I guess the surge doesn't start until September, so that means that we can forget about that report that we're going to be hearing about in September that's going to tell us where we're up to so that we could make a determination if we wanted to stay there or get the heck out.
Right. Now, Christy, is this just a game? I mean, is this just all part of the game? Is he being a good soldier here, and his job is to hang in there and see if you can occupy this country for as long as you can and give us some space politically in this country?
Well, I think that might be part of it. I thought, I don't know if you saw Colin Powell this morning on Meet the Press, but he was very harsh, I think, in a couple of his pronouncements. And he pointed out, which I was very happy to see him do, that back last fall, when President Bush talked to all of the military advisors over in Iraq, they all said, no surge. We don't want a surge. The surge is not going to work. And so even if we do get a pronouncement from on high, as Victoria said, in September about how things are going, I think that Petraeus may at some time just be saying what he thinks that we want to hear, because there really is no good news that he can be saying at this point. You know, the surge is in full swing, but it's not working. Instead of explaining why, it's just easier to say, well, actually, there's no surge yet.
Yeah, and speaking of generals who did not want a surge, Peter Pace seems to be the last man standing who was in favor of this Iraq debacle in terms of the military, and he is not going to be renominated, which I understand it's the first time that's happened. Let's listen to Defense Secretary Robert Gates announcing that Pace will not be renominated. This is number 26.
It had been my intention from early in my tenure to recommend to the President that General Pace be renominated for another 2-year term as chairman. However, after consultations over the course of several weeks with both Republican and Democratic senators, I concluded that because General Pace has served as chairman and vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for the last 6 years, the focus of his confirmation process would have been on the past rather than the future, and further that there was the very real prospect the process would be quite contentious. I am no stranger to contentious confirmations, and I do not shrink from them. However, I have decided that at this moment in our history, the nation, our men and women in uniform, and General himself would not be well served by a divisive ordeal in selecting the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Now, Petraeus, the FCC has lost a court case that says now that if I have an expletive that does not specifically involve an obscene act, I could actually shout it out if I was so inclined. But let's just say this, as far as I can tell, is a load of horse crap. This is one of the most absurd things I've ever heard in my life.
Right. I mean, it is absurd, and I don't claim to know what the real reason is, although there are various rumors around. None of them really actually make much sense either to me. But yes, it's absurd to think that this would be a more divisive confirmation hearing than somebody new coming up would be. It's absurd to think that Congress wouldn't show their general deference towards people in uniform, as they tend to do these kinds of things, and it's probably absurd to imagine that he wouldn't have been confirmed again. So the idea that they're getting rid of him just because people might be mean to him at a congressional hearing is is absurd and farcical. I wish I knew the real reason, but I don't.
But what does this say? Go ahead, Victoria.
There's something else that's absurd. He makes a statement that sounds so sensible, but when you actually look at the words, it's completely absurd. He says that because he's been there for the past 6 years, his focus would be on the past instead of on the future. And he says that as though it actually makes sense. And then you think about what he just said. It makes no sense at all as a statement.
Now, but what also strikes me is, Christy, is that we have heard now for years that the Iraq, the war that we're involved in, which Iraq is the central front on, which the global war on terror, which is bigger than Stalin and Lenin and Pol Pot and Chairman Mao and Hitler and, I don't know, Castro, all rolled into one. Right. And now, all of a sudden, the guy who's been the architect of this, the guy who could give continuity for our armed forces, well, people might be critical of him in front of the Senate, and that may even make it on TV. So let's just get someone new in there. Is that what we're supposed to believe?
I guess so. They're right. It makes no sense, and I think it's honestly offensive. You know, oh, poor little General Pace, he can't handle the criticism. I mean, that's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I think, of course, we still have the grand architect of a lot of the war still in office, and that's Vice President Dick Cheney. But it's almost as if they're doing this just burn of getting everyone out of there that could possibly be held accountable. And so, there's a great deal to be said for looking forward, but you can't just ignore the past. You can't just ignore that the war has just been a huge debacle and that these guys aren't going to be held accountable for it all. Yeah, absolutely ridiculous.
One thing it does allow them to do is a little trick they've pulled before, and that's, what will happen is there will be a confirmation hearing. Probably the vast majority of senators will vote to confirm, as they tend to do, and then will come out, will support the president's policy, whatever it is, and any time a senator tries to be critical of that policy, the response will be, well, you just voted to confirm the guy who agrees with this policy. Why did you do that? So
that's right.
They will play this little trick again. They will reboot. They will add another 6 months yet again.
And this is exactly what they did with Petraeus.
Exactly.
Right.
And on top of that, it's going to be a situation of, what do you think about what's happening here? What do you think about what's happening there? You know, to be honest with you, I'm not in the job yet. I don't really know how to respond to that.
And another admiral, and I know this is bitchy, but another admiral, because this is such a seaborne battle that we're fighting, isn't it?
Yeah. Apparently, those Navy guys really come in and save the day. All right. Well, I don't know. This is it's just astonishing to me. And the silence, the deafening silence coming out of the media from the people like the David Broders or the Joe all these people who have told, the Thomas Friedmans, all these people who are all military geniuses when they said go into Iraq, support the commander-in-chief. Where are these so-called adults now?
I think they're hiding with the same people from the administration getting out. I think it's all part of the, hey, man, it wasn't me way of defense. I think at this point we're going to see a lot of people out there to try and save themselves and save their credibility and their careers. And you can't do that by owning up and saying, you know what, a few years ago I was wrong. These decisions I made, those were wrong too.